this video, we will be continuing our analysis of the TriStar Godzilla animated series. So if you haven't watched part 1, then go watch it. Episode 22 starts off with Godzilla defeating a giant jellyfish. Nothing really to note here, except for what happens in the rest of the episode, where the human characters somehow time travel just by going through a storm, and end up in the year 2022, in an apocalyptic future. Okay, so
What year is this?
18 AD, that's after DRAGMA, but by the Roman calendar, it's 2022.
couple of things to unpack here. One, 18 years minus 2022 would put the current beginning of the episode before they time travel in 2004. That's a heck of a time gap between when this series should have first started, which was in 1998. I forget exactly in which episode, but I distinctly remember near the beginning of one of the episodes, the character Mimik mentions to Nick how he's studied Godzilla for so long. Apparently the DRAGMA were eventually able to kill Godzilla, although we don't actually see this fight happen, and given how small they are, I imagine they likely killed him through sheer force of numbers, rather than a single DRAGMA individual. This is mainly because we see later in the episode the DRAGMAs being dented by laser weapons, and again, it's possible these laser weapons are far more powerful than what we normally see throughout the series. I'm kinda curious who would win in a fight between the DRAGMA and the weird little skeletal fit forms that Shin Godzilla poops out at the end of his movie. Anyway, the humans eventually return to the past or present, and with Godzilla's help are able to destroy the DRAGMA before they reach their final forms. Episode 23 gives us Godzilla's confirmed weight of 60,000 metric tons. He then goes on to beat a giant rhino monster who, while does manage to pick up a fight, Godzilla is able to knock him out with an attack. Episode 24 has Godzilla fighting a giant mosquito monster called Skeetera. I wonder if this actually inspired the design for Megaguirus, since this episode came out in 1999 and the Megaguirus movie didn't come out until 2000. Just like Megaguirus, Skeetera is able to absorb the energy of a monster and to some degree copy their unique abilities. Though Skeetera can apparently lose this power if they're dehydrated. Skeetera then goes on to absorb the energy of both the T-Rex and King Cobra, and while we don't really see much of a fight happen between the three, it does seem like Skeetera has the advantage against the two. Not that we really see Skeetera use any unique ability that those two monsters would have, and since they appeared to still be combat capable afterwards, I'm guessing Skeetera didn't drain a whole lot of energy from them, which is why I'm kinda hesitant to say that Skeetera in this state is the equivalent of the T-Rex and King Cobra combined. There's also the Bat Monster, but I'm not sure if Skeetera managed to drain energy from them or not. The two monsters seem to stalemate each other, though I'd say it's likely simply because Skeetera stays out of range of Godzilla's attacks, but one tail swipe is still enough to send them flying, and they get defeated by electrocution. If you wanted to highball and say that Skeetera was the equivalent of at least T-Rex and King Cobra combined, then that would mean that Godzilla's at least twice as strong as he was near the beginning of Season 1, seeing as how a weaker monster, Skeetera, was still able to get the drop on both the T-Rex and King Cobra, at least long enough to drain their energy. Episode 25 has Godzilla fighting a living Sphinx statue, which once again can shrug off Godzilla's atomic breath attack. The Sphinx seems to primarily use its wings to flap sand at Godzilla, and I guess the force of wind was enough to eventually knock Godzilla down. The Sphinx technically wins round 1, although Godzilla does get back up once it flies off. Godzilla, however, seems to do much better in round 2, and the two seemed evenly matched until the humans are finally able to contribute to the fight and bring the Sphinx down for good. It's really kinda hard to say who's the stronger of the two, unless you want to argue Godzilla got a small power boost after the first fight and was enough for him to be evenly matched against the Sphinx, but it's not like we see the Sphinx repeat the same strategy again in round 2. Episode 26 has Godzilla fighting a monster called Medusa, who has the ability to absorb water from any target it touches, which as we later see includes Godzilla. Look at him all shriveled up and stuff. This makes the Medusa monster stronger, and we also find out that in this episode the military is upgraded to have laser weapons as well. Enough power to bring down 10 mutants, you say? Interesting. Assuming that most of the mutants should scale somewhat around the power of the original TriStar Godzilla, we're looking at possibly at the bare minimum town levels of energy. Of course, I'm assuming this is when they use their entire arsenal from a single chopper, and not with a single shot of lasers or anything like that. Outside of the water, Godzilla loses, because again, once Medusa touches Godzilla, it's able to absorb water and weaken Godzilla. However, in the water, Godzilla actually seems to have the advantage. So I'd say who would win the fight between Godzilla and Medusa ultimately comes down to the location, as Godzilla does much better against Medusa in round 2. The next episode has Godzilla getting chummy with a similar species, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce, and I'm just going to simply refer to as Como. Anyway, Como faces off against Gamera's ugly cousin, and seems to do quite well against the giant turtle, pushing him back and using her own atomic breath to bury him in snow. Eventually, the giant turtle returns, however, and takes a swing at Godzilla, once again taking Godzilla's atomic breath, and manages to knock out Godzilla with a tackle. Como has to actually bail Godzilla out, and again manages to push the giant turtle back, and if it weren't for the unstable terrain they were on, yeah, Como probably would have won, but the turtle at the last moment manages to grab onto her foot and drag her and her unborn baby down into the depths below. Godzilla only just now regaining consciousness. Yeah, the dude was KO'd by one tackle from the turtle. This is probably Godzilla's most embarrassing loss in the entire series, because not only does he almost seem to get one shot by just a single headbutt from a giant turtle, he's knocked out for several minutes, and his surrogate wife and unborn child take the loss for him. Como definitely does a lot better fighting the giant turtle than Godzilla does. Godzilla really is the weakest link in this episode. I don't even want to think about how a fight between Como and Godzilla would go. Speaking of losing hard, Godzilla almost dies to bacteria. Like, there's a giant germ monster who's actually strong enough to pierce Godzilla's skin and infect him with his little virus thing, which Godzilla is unable to get over on his own, confirming that the germ's bacteria is stronger than Godzilla's white blood cell. While Godzilla is able to mostly destroy the germ monster's original body with his atomic breath, enough of it survives to formulate another attack for round 2, only this time Godzilla's a lot wiser to its attacks and manages to stop them without getting infected again. If we're just talking the main body itself, then I'd say it's only slightly weaker than Godzilla, since it is able to fatally wound him via the virus infection. This brings us to episode 29, Godzilla vs. the Sub-Zero monster. Oh boy. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is not one, but 2 occurrences in this episode where Godzilla and the Sub-Zero monster have a beam clash. The resulting clash creates what is basically a miniature Supercell storm, complete with tornadoes and lightning. Now, I have done a lot of research on this particular feat, and I have found a lot of different results for said feat. The Versus Wiki currently has it rated at island level, although when you click on the source for the calculation, all it does is calculate the temperature of Godzilla's atomic breath needed to create the storm, and not actually the amount of destructive energy it would take to form said storm. We somehow got to 34.8 quadrillion Kelvin, don't ask me what that is in Celsius or Fahrenheit, and that somehow got up to 38.8 gigatons of TNT, which is island level. However, there have been a lot of other calculations for this same feat, all of which varying quite drastically. One which lowballed it to small city level, others taking it as high as continent level. Yeah, there are some highball calculations that put it at large country to possibly continent level. However, the person who did these calculations admits that this was quite a long time ago. I mean, the calculations for the large country to continent level date back to like 2015 or 2016. A more recent calculation from the same user on the Versus Wiki calculated to be anywhere from 26.5 to 137.4 megatons of TNT, which is roughly city to mountain level, which does not reflect what is actually used for Godzilla's attack potency on the Versus Wiki page. Again, they don't actually show the calculation for how he got rated to island level, nor are they using the highball calcs that got him to possibly continent level, despite the fact that these calculations are almost a decade old. The user themselves pointed out how there have been recordings of hydrogen bombs causing rain and thunderstorms to occur mere minutes after detonation, the 10.4 megaton IV Mike hydrogen bomb being one of those examples cited. And that was after minutes of detonation, while this clearly occurs in mere seconds, so it obviously have to be stronger than that. At the bare minimum, this feat is definitely at least city level, possibly up to island level, so for now this is this Godzilla's potential attack potency, city to island level. There are other feats that we will cover later in this video that definitely rate Godzilla to potentially higher than city level. Whew, I need a break like the Sub-Zero monster clearly does. Episode 30 has Godzilla fighting another giant bug monster, this one called the Megapede, which seems to get the drop on Godzilla when it uses its Poison Sting attack. Although I should point out that Godzilla manages to quickly recover from said poison, I'm still giving the win here to the Megapede. It transforms into a second form, and we see it tank what is literally referred to in the episode as Stinger missiles. Although, again, I'm not gonna bother to power scale Stinger missiles because obviously they shouldn't really do anything to the monsters at this point, given that they should at the bare minimum be city level. Not even the buff Stinger missiles in the Metal Gear games do that much damage. However, Godzilla seems to do much better against the Megapede once it's in its second form. I guess not having the poison attack anymore really put a damper on its performance. Episode 31 has Godzilla fighting a monster called the Thorny Devil, who is once again resisting Godzilla's atomic breath. Jeez, at this point it'd be easier to name monsters who aren't immune to Godzilla's atomic breath. It physically overpowers him, sending him quite a distance through the air, and manages to knock him out with some poison spikes, which are apparently the equivalent of 20 scorpion stings. Godzilla, however, recovers quickly enough, just in time to be knocked around again, and get hit with more toxic spikes. It looks like in this first shot, Godzilla gets hit with 2 of them, and then later gets hit with at least 9 of them. So in this one fight alone, Godzilla is basically enduring the equivalent of like 220 scorpions all stinging him at once. That's a pretty high poison resistance when you really think about it. Even if it was just 2 of those spikes that was able to knock him out, which would be the equivalent of 40 scorpions. The fact that he's even surviving is impressive. In round 2, however, Godzilla does much better this time around, actually managing to overpower the creature, and discovers that it has a weakness, as in its soft underbelly, and also can't get up if it's on, its back. Kinda hard to say who's the stronger between these two, but I'm gonna say they're evenly matched with their abilities coming into play, as well as their weaknesses. That or Godzilla just simply got stronger in the short time between their first and second fights. Episode 32 proves that Godzilla is so mighty that even natural disasters are afraid of him. Nah, just kidding. That's just the special ability of this episode's monster, the SHREWD, who can somehow generate a tornado just by moving. A fishing boat to the face is enough to knock out Godzilla, though I'll be generous and say he was simply taken off guard. Not to mention, having a fishing boat that large suddenly hit you square in the face, I mean, it had to have been flying pretty fast through that tornado. The humans build a device that is designed to output 5 million psi's of air pressure into the heart of the tornado, which will disrupt it. That's basically about 0.23 tons of TNT, or just under building level. It's a good thing too, because the tornado completely tanks Godzilla's atomic breath. No surprise there. When we do finally get a proper fight between the two monsters, its agility able to far outperform Godzilla Godzilla, quickly recovering from any attacks he does land, and even manages to cause bleeding to Godzilla with its slash attacks. It's not long before it brings down Godzilla, getting a clean win for the fight. Eventually the humans are able to take it out, but yeah, this was a hard loss for Godzilla. Next episode has Godzilla fighting some sort of cave monster referred to as the Hydra. While he's able to both physically overpower the larger one as well as easily melt the smaller ones with his atomic breath, its regenerative abilities make it difficult to kill. Not to mention its little spit attack is eventually able to turn Godzilla into a statue. Fortunately, H2O is the literal solution, as it just crumbles apart when submerged in water. I'd honestly say, just like the Medusa monster, the victor between these two depends entirely on location. Next episode has a bunch of scorpion monsters created by the military, but we're gonna mainly focus on the big one, whose stinger is not powerful enough to penetrate Godzilla's hide. Yeah, Godzilla is able to actually tank this thing's attacks, as well as push it back with his atomic breath, and probably would have won if it weren't for the military's interference. It is, however, able to damage Godzilla with its acid attack, and injecting its stinger directly into the wound injects enough poison to knock Godzilla out. But again, this only happened due to human interference. Once Godzilla is cured, however, we can actually see the wound heal up almost instantly. This is probably the best example we get that this Godzilla has regenerative abilities. The little scorpions eventually swarm the big scorpion, and Godzilla is able to eventually torch them all. Although at the end of the episode, the military guy basically confirms that they've got more scorpions along the way. I imagine if Season 3 had been a thing, we would have seen these things return. Now whether it would have been a big scorpion or more little scorpions, who's to say? Episode 35 is probably the last important episode in the series, not only because it's our last appearance with Cameron Winter, but also because of his creation, the Lizard Slayers. And he's got some pretty interesting facts about each of these Lizard Slayers.
Lizard Slayer 1 features titanium shielding, 17 heat-seeking missiles, and concussion cannons that can pound away a mountain.
So yeah, Lizard Slayer 1 has enough firepower to quote-unquote pound away a mountain. Not necessarily confirming that a single concussion shot would destroy a mountain, but probably with just a few shots would be able to do it. So I'd say this is probably in the city level range of attack power. Lizard Slayer 3 is also confirmed to possess laser weaponry. Keep that in mind for later. Godzilla's physically stronger than each of the Lizard Slayers individually, and if it weren't for the fact that it was a 3-on-1 fight, Godzilla would have probably cleaned house. Of course, it also probably doesn't help that the people piloting the Lizard Slayers are kind of bumpkus.
It's official. I've hired the Three Stooges.
Hate to break this to you people, but we don't ever actually see Godzilla get directly hit by these concussion blasts. They do impact near him, and they do knock him off his feet, but we don't actually see him get hit by them. Though I don't think it would have been enough to kill him with just 1 or 2 shots anyway. Lizard Slayer 3, the one stated to have the lightest armor, is able to endure Godzilla's atomic breath, so that's notable. However, despite it being stated to be armed with lasers, it only ever uses its missiles, so sadly, no arguable feat for Godzilla dodging lasers, unfortunately. Okay, so for episode 36, basically Godzilla's facing off against these giant hummingbirds that have a special ability where basically they flap their wings at 500 miles an hour and is somehow able to activate some sort of reflective camouflage that makes them turn invisible, unless someone else is traveling at the same exact speed as their wing flapping, in which case they'll be able to actually see said hummingbirds. Even barely able to see the hummingbirds, Godzilla was able to get a lucky hit on one of them, and yeah, basically one-shots them into unconsciousness. The humans developed special goggles that allow Godzilla to see the hummingbirds as they're basically moving at like 500 miles an hour, and this allows him to make short work of them. Although, seeing as how his father had a speed up between 300 to 500 miles per hour, theoretically Godzilla would be able to see them if he was running at his max speed, but obviously he can't really only do that in the middle of combat. Next episode has Godzilla facing off against some sort of underground tentacle plant monster, and while he is able to easily tear through some of them, eventually it becomes too much and it brings him down, having the humans rescue Godzilla with their laser weapons, which easily cut through the tentacles. The human characters make a strange statement where they basically determine that this creature must weigh about 100,000 pounds, which is only roughly about like 50 tons, and they believe this would be difficult for Godzilla to lift, when even his father's original weight was 500 tons, which is like 10 times that amount, and this Godzilla weighs 60,000 metric tons. Did they just forget that? It's made even more clear when he proceeds to toss the thing through the air just by lifting it up with his jaws alone. That being said, Godzilla still needed the humans' laser weapons to bail him out in both rounds of the fight, so I am going to give the tentacle armor what's-its a slight advantage over Godzilla. He would have lost both fights had the humans not been there to help. Episode 38 has Godzilla fighting against what is basically just called the fire monster, and when it absorbs enough oil, it's able to copy Madara Uchiha's Susano and just form a giant fire clothing around it, though it should be noted that when cut off from oil, the creature goes down quite quickly to Godzilla. I mean, hitting a monster that feeds off heat with heat, probably not the smartest idea, but I will say that Godzilla is physically stronger than the monster. I'd say though, again, it ultimately depends on location, since they were mostly in the water at the time. Not that it really matters, because they basically beat the creature by just getting it to exhaust its energy. Look at how much it shrinks with each attack it does, and just look at how tiny it is. Yeah, Godzilla is stronger than this thing. Without its fire absorption abilities, this thing would be a joke. And it's sad too, because this is technically the last episode of the series, not counting the 2 unaired episodes. Speaking of which, the technical episode 39 has Godzilla facing off against a swamp monster, and these two monsters fight each other 3 separate times throughout the episode. Really, its only real ability is being able to spit large chunks of mud out, which do temporarily down Godzilla, but he's quickly able to break free. Of course, as soon as he does, the creature pulls a Houdini, and this pretty much repeats the same in the second round as well. Round 3, however, the swamp monster seems like it's defeated by Godzilla, but it turns out to have just been a fake out, and it quickly takes down Godzilla after tackling him into a building. And yeah, Godzilla stays knocked out for like quite a few minutes. It doesn't wake up until the fight is just about over. The swamp monster has time to shoot down a helicopter and be called off by his human companion, kind of like with Nick and Godzilla. But yeah, Godzilla's knocked out for like quite a few minutes near the end of the episode, so I'm giving this win to the swamp monster. Our last episode has Godzilla fighting what is basically the creature from the Iron Lung video game. I want to say Godzilla has a slight strength advantage, because even after getting accidentally hit with some tranquilizers, he's still able to put up a good fight against the giant fish. Not to mention, it seemed pretty eager to get away from Godzilla in all their encounters, though it was able to push Godzilla back with a tackle. Of course, this was when he was still weakened from the tranquilizer, but still pretty impressive. So how strong is the TriStar series Godzilla? Well, let's go over the basics. So, according to Sci-Fi Japan's The Ultimate Guide to Godzilla the series, Godzilla has a confirmed max speed of 300 miles per hour. So it's actually not 500 miles per hour like I originally thought, just 300. He can run faster than trains as shown in the Juggernaut episode, which really isn't that impressive. They only move like, 50 to, 70 miles per hour at most or something like that. And he can swim faster than submarine torpedoes. Assuming that this is the Mark 48 American torpedoes, the same ones used in the live-action movie, that's only about 55 knots or 63 miles per hour, so no surprise there. In addition, he's also been described as facing his foes head-on and will fight to the death, to the point where Nick has to actually tell him to retreat or something like that if he's in trouble, like when he gets blinded or something. Guy does not know when to quit. His atomic breath is also classified as radioactive fire, and he can burrow instantly through buildings and solid rock. as we see many times, most notably being when he was able to use it to dodge attacks from the alien weapons in the Monster Wars trilogy. He also has an aversion to bright lights. I don't know if they can like blind him or if they just simply distract him or whatever. He should, of course, once being fully grown as seen in episode 2, be at the very least as strong as his father, who, if you've seen his video, we determined to be in the high city block level to possibly even as high as small town level. So he should be in that general range just starting off. Near the end of the episode, he's able to easily throw all 5 million tons of rocks and can create whirlpools in the ocean by swimming, strong enough to lift large ships up from the ocean floor. The Versus Wiki did have a discussion trying to calculate how much energy it would take to create such whirlpools with such energy to lift large ships, but never found anything conclusive from that. Concerning the Queen Bee, well, there's also been some debate on whether the volcano feat the Queen Bee survives is usable or not, since we're not sure how far Queen Bee was from the blast radius when the volcano erupted. Though I have seen arguments from both sides saying that she could have still been close enough for the lava to reach her or something like that, or for some parts of the blast to reach her. It should be noted the last shot we see of Godzilla and the Queen Bee, the human characters are still running off the island, and then a few moments later we see them on the boat suddenly driving away from the island out in the open water. Now obviously these two scenes did not occur within mere seconds of each other, probably at least a couple minutes passed. More than enough time for Godzilla to burrow away and Queen Bee to possibly recover and still get far enough away from the volcanic eruption radius. What we can take away from the Queen Bee, however, is a calculation someone did that calculated her speed flying to be at Mach 2.7, or about 918 meters per second, which is in the supersonic plus range of speed. And obviously Godzilla is able to react to this because, yeah, the Queen Bee posed no challenge on her own. While we didn't get to see how Godzilla would fare reacting to Lizard Slayer 3's lasers, we do actually might have a higher level speed feat coming from the Crackler of all things. So the Crackler was stated to be composed of electromagnetic energy, and someone actually did calculations for how much energy it would take to create such a creature, and basically came to the conclusion that punches from this creature would read to about 29.5 gigatons of energy, which is island level. So yay, woohoo, we actually have another possible island level feat. And this was actually stated to possibly just be a low ball for the creature, especially because said creature was able to absorb energy from Godzilla's atomic breath, which made him larger and likely stronger as well. And yet Godzilla was still holding his own against said creature. In addition, the Crackler can send out lightning, which has been observed to be able to vaporize parts of buildings. There's actually one moment in the episode where Godzilla actually seems to dodge the lightning. Now we're getting somewhere. Contrary to popular belief, lightning actually doesn't travel at the speed of light, more like 186,000 meters per second, which I think is roughly about 416,000 miles per hour, or about Mach 542, which would be in the massively hypersonic category of reaction speed. Though the calculations from the Versus Wiki actually measured it to be 152.8. Not exactly sure how they came to a much different conclusion than me, but I'll put it up there and you can be the judge. Going back to the Monster Wars trilogy, just a reminder, the alien ships were able to kill monsters that were comparable in strength to Godzilla with basically just 1 or 2 shots. Meanwhile, Godzilla is surviving like multiple shots from the same weapons, showing that Godzilla is a far cry now than he was when he first fought the other monsters. I also tried to look up what exactly they're shooting out, and the only thing I could find on Wikizilla was that they were specifically referred to as beam weapons. Someone argued that they might be as hot as the sun because they're like plasma, and I looked into that, and funny enough, you don't actually have to be like star level to survive temperatures as hot as the sun. Yeah, the Versus Wiki's got a few calculations on these, but yeah, you really only have to be like, I think like city block level to endure attacks that are as hot as the sun. I guess it all comes down to just simply duration or something like that makes all the difference. I mean, the Predator in Predator 2 was able to tank having a bolt of lightning strike, yes, and then lightning's pretty hot. Moving on to Cyber Godzilla of all things. Godzilla is able to headbutt Cyber Godzilla and send him flying back quite a distance. This was actually calculated to be about 11.6 kilotons of TNT, which would actually be in the town level range. Or am I getting that mixed up with when he's able to blast him quite a distance into the air with his atomic breath? That one might be the 11.6 kilotons, or it's the 80.5 tons of TNT, which would be high city block level. This is going off the calculations based off the fact that Godzilla weighs 60,000 metric tons, and I guess also assuming that his father, now a cyborg, might be in a similar range of weight, though they've also argued that Godzilla should realistically be more around 25,000 metric tons. But we should go by what is actually stated in the show itself. Godzilla is able to demonstrate feelings such as loyalty and compassion for other species, such as with Como and her egg, with Godzilla wanting to become an adoptive parent, as well as his fondness for Nick, who's basically like his, I guess, surrogate birth mother, father, whatever, as well as his acceptance in sparing Nessie once he understood what was going on with Nessie, and of course him being able to adapt and form strategies, most notably shown when fighting against the Thorny Devil, how he lost badly in the first fight but did a lot better in the second fight, as well as how he fared when fighting against the Germinator in round 2. And as stated before by Nick himself, Godzilla's getting smarter as time goes on. So I'd say at the bare minimum high animalistic, because he is able to understand what Nick is telling him. When he tells him to go to the water, he knows to go to the water. He understands that the visor goggles they put on him to help him fight the hummingbirds is going to help him, so he doesn't yank it off as soon as it drops onto him. In the episode with the Firebird, he helps defeat the Firebird by basically blasting a part of a volcano, causing it to collapse and seal the Firebird and her babies within. This was actually calculated to have a speed of Mach 6.4 for Godzilla's atomic breath travel speed. In the early Season 1 episode with the Nano Monster, Godzilla is actually able to jump from the ocean floor and still get very high up in the air. This was calculated to be about 349,000 metric tons of power in order to reach said height from the ocean floor. And that's not even taking into account water resistance, so this is probably a low ball. Point of the matter is, this Godzilla can jump. When the Robo Yeti does his judo throw on Godzilla, this was calculated to be able to lift 274,000 metric tons, based off the ease at which he's able to throw the 60,000 metric ton Godzilla. If it isn't obvious at this point, this Godzilla should be able to lift Godzilla's far bigger and heavier than himself if he tried. Lizard Slayer 3's missiles were calculated to be over 101 giganewtons, which is basically over 24 tons, so it would be city block level, and this was the energy they generate just by impacting near Godzilla, because it doesn't seem like Godzilla ever gets directly hit, but the force alone is enough to knock him off his feet. And finally, going back to the military's new weapons that they tried to use against Medusa, they specified that they were referred to as fusion missiles, and Nick himself stated they wouldn't do any good against Medusa. Meanwhile, Godzilla's atomic fire is able to actually harm Medusa. So basically, the Versus Wiki calculation argued that Godzilla's atomic flames is hotter than fusion energy, which I guess basically comes out to like maybe 100 million degrees Celsius. Which, yeah, that'd be hotter than even Heisei Godzilla's like super spiral atomic breath or whatever it's called. Thanks to the statement concerning Lizard Slayer 1 being able to destroy mountains with its concussion blast, as well as of course the feat with Godzilla's little Supercell creation against the Sub-Zero monster, and now with new evidence concerning the Crackler, I can wholeheartedly say with confidence this about Godzilla. I'd say he has enough feats to put him solid at island level, though part of me still wants to argue that he might only be physically mountain level, assuming that it would take multiple hits from Lizard Slayer 1 to actually take down Godzilla, but given the incompetence of the people piloting the Lizard Slayers, it's really hard to say how well Godzilla would have really fared against all three of them, even individually. To say that this Godzilla is an upgrade over his father would be an understatement. He has truly redeemed the name of Godzilla in the TriStar era. Join me next time as we dip our toes into the 21st century with Godzilla Millennium. Take care, folks. See you then.